Hi, I'm Victoria Alexander. I'm the founder of Realty Collective. We've been in business for almost 19 years. I started this company to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate in general in New York City, but real estate agents and brokers, which I know have not a great reputation here in New York. I'm a matchmaker, a therapist, your sounding board, your sense of reason when everything's going to hit the fan, and it's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we reach your goal of making home ownership a possibility as you ride the wild roller coaster of emotions that is the home buying process. So if I do Manhattan as well, it's not just about Brooklyn, but I live and our office is here in Brooklyn and we represent property in Brooklyn. I don't represent houses in Manhattan, but the buying process is the same in most of the boroughs. And Staten Island's still another beast, but we don't need to dive down there, but I can recommend great brokers that work there as well. And my little job is to guide you through this process. It's not to find you the needle in the haystack that doesn't exist out there, that's not on the internet. The internet has changed all of that and made everything more transparent and accountable. And that's what I think a lot of people want from real estate and their experience there. So I think it's a real benefit to everybody that the job description is that there's years of expertise that I have accumulated to help guide you through this process to make it least stressful, help you not make some missteps, and find the property that's right for you and protect you from your own instincts that sometimes can get in the way of reason and get you the closing table. And in New York City, real estate brokers' fees are negotiable. I know there's a lot of talk about broker fees recently, and but in New York City, sellers recognize the value of and importance of paying a buyer's broker, and that trend will probably likely persist. If there's a property or broker that there isn't a fee being offered to the buyer's broker, we'll figure out how to navigate that situation. But I have done it before in the 19 years because this is not a new thing. REBNY has changed all that. If a commission for a buyer's broker hasn't been pre-negotiated for a property, your agent will inform you and ensure you receive the necessary professional support during the significant financial transaction, while also making sure the costs are consistent with market conditions. That's my little tidbit on that. We do this class because it is important for people to be educated. That's why I do it. You're going to meet two people that I've worked with before that are great team members. You're here to understand the process and understand what's important for you in a transaction and personality wise, and to help you build your team. Because the first thing you do in this process is to build your team. And those are three people: a mortgage professional, a lawyer, and a buyer's broker, if you are a buyer. This class is geared towards buyers. So if you're selling, that's on Thursday. So it's important that you understand what to ask these people and what the process will look like, so you're armed with the information to make educated decisions. I think there's a lot of gatekeeping around this industry, and I want to arm people with information so that they're making educated choices for themselves because they know themselves best and what they want and what they need to make this not the most stressful process ever for them. So that's why we do this class and why I want to introduce you to some really great team members. So the first place I always introduce people to is that you need to get your pre-approval done, and that is the financing bit. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna to introduce herself and talk to her about the first step in the process, which is figuring out what you can afford and what a bank is going to loan you. Donna, you're muted. You got there you go.
My apologies. Anyway, thanks, Victoria, and welcome everyone. And I'm glad to be here today. I am a loan officer for Citibank, and we're actually the bank that never sleeps. And for over 30 years, I've been helping buyers navigate the mortgage process from the beginning to the pre-approval to the closing. And during my time in mortgage lending, I've also been credit trained and I've had credit underwriting authority to $1 million. Why is that important? That is a skill that is necessary to determine what a bank will lend you. The process is it's a very compliance driven process. And that's why I'm here to hold your hand from beginning to end to help you navigate this component of the process. And then the third component of the process is your attorney. And I'll hand it off to Jody.
Okay, thank you, Donna, and thank you, Victoria, for putting this little forum together for everybody. My name is Jody Materna. I am a real estate attorney licensed to practice in both New York and New Jersey. I have nearly 20 years of experience. Just as a little bit of information as a background, I had worked at a very large firm for a number of years where I did 50 to $100 million deals. And then about 15 years ago, I started my own practice. And ever since then, I have a very niche market of dealing specifically with purchasers and sellers when they are buying condos, co-ops, townhouses, mixed use properties, and that type of thing. As Donna had said, she mentioned the word hand holding. That is what happens a lot when you're buying a property. As a first time buyer, it is one of the biggest purchases that you're going to make in your lifetime, and it is so important to have your team set up. You need to have a great mortgage broker, you need to have a seasoned real estate attorney, and also a wonderful broker that can all work together to get you to the finish line. I'd like to say that I'm a seasoned real estate broker, a real estate attorney rather, because of all of my knowledge that I have. As I said, I represent purchasers and sellers. I've also served if you get a mortgage, I've served as the bank attorney, and I'm also an attorney to several co-ops. So I have a vast set of knowledge, which allows me to see pitfalls in contracts. And I could talk for hours and hours about this, but I guess, Victoria, do you want to go on to the next part of it?
Yeah, sure. Let me ask, I want to go back and just ask Donna, when people are starting this process and getting introduced to you, what are the most important things that they need to know about applying for a mortgage?
One of the most important things is we need to determine what you qualify for, what the costs associated with the purchase are. We need to make sure that you have all of the necessary items in place, or at least we would show you how to reach that point if it's a little premature. When you apply to be pre-approved for a mortgage, you're going to select the appropriate mortgage program that we'll discuss that's right for based on your needs. We're also going to determine how much you can afford. And that's where my underwriting experience comes in very handy, because I can take off a loan officer hat and put on an underwriter's hat to really drill down on what an underwriter will expect when they review your application. We're also going to outline what the requirements are to cover closing costs, down payment, etc., things like that. And we're also, when you reach the point where you've identified the property, we'll be looking at the due diligence on that, and I'll be helping you through that component as well.
Tell us a little bit about then just the mortgage products and things like what I always think that people ask about. Farah, can you go to the next slide? Is that, oh, maybe I'll just skip over that and go. So why buy now? The rent's too damn high. You want to do your own design. You want to build equity. I always tell people you're paying somebody's mortgage today if you're renting. If you're paying your landlords or you're paying your own. So figure out who you want to be investing in.
And I think also it's the opportunity to start to create generational wealth. You need to keep that in perspective rather than, like you said, Victoria, just paying someone else's mortgage.
Right. So it's all of our jobs to guide you through this process and give you advice and our local expertise. I'm going to definitely say when picking a mortgage professional is that you're not going to be in a great position if you're using Rocket or Quicken Loans. Those are not competitive here in New York City because of the co-op and condo market. There's just so many variables. You need to have a person on the other side of that. So it's really important that you're picking not your friend that just got your real estate license, not your uncle that is also a lawyer that handles, or he's a divorce lawyer, but he could do this too. You want people that are experts, that this is what they do on a daily basis. They're doing co-op and condos and 1 to 4 family purchases, and they're doing co-op and condo transactions from the financial part, and they're here in New York City, and they're a real person when it comes to the mortgage piece of it. So yes, so building equity and investing in yourself. These are reasons to buy now. Go to the next slide, Farah. So the other thing I ask people to consider is either rent versus buy matrix. And so I like to use the New York Times rent versus buy matrix that they have made for us. they have this calculator. They recently updated it and I love it so much. And the only reason you might not be in the position to be purchasing right now is because, hey, maybe you have a rent stabilized apartment. Punch in the numbers, it makes sense to live in that apartment for the rest of your life, or a rent controlled apartment if you're even luckier. But you're going to figure out what your rent is and your other expenses, and the calculator is going to say, hey, in 5 years you have would have been silly if you didn't buy right now. So here are the numbers, and they give you a really great formula. Next slide. So we don't need to convince you that buying right now is good for you. There's a way to break down those numbers. So once you have figured out that the calculator is going to say you should be buying if you're staying in New York. The other thing I always tell people is if you're not staying here in New York, probably not a good idea to buy unless you're planning on coming back here or you have family here or roots and you're only leaving for a short amount of time. You'll definitely probably only want to buy a condo and not a co-op. But if you plan to stay here in New York, we all know rents are only getting higher, cost of living is getting more expensive. Purchasing is something that you'll have long-term equity in. I always tell the story about my own home purchase. I bought this house 14 years ago. I thought I would be trading up and buying another house. I didn't want to buy this house. I wanted to buy another house. I had an agent in my office, somebody that works with me for 17 years. And thankfully, even agents need agents because you don't know how to. I was emotional and not being rational about certain things and thought I knew better. And I needed the guidance from somebody to help rein in some of my expectations. And thankfully, they encouraged me to purchase this home. I pay my mortgage is less than I would pay in rent right now. And my property has doubled, maybe tripled. If my neighbor's house sells for what it's on the market for, that would be really great for for me. So I think that it's your best investment to stay here in New York is to own something. And then if it's not perfect, like I didn't think this house was gonna be perfect. I thought I would be buying a bigger house. I can't afford a bigger house than this, but I think that you can always trade up. So if you're going to just get in somewhere, studio, 1 bedroom, and then you can trade up to a better space. And so once you have assembled your team, which is your mortgage professional, your real estate broker, and your attorney, then you might need some other people. You might need a contractor, an architect, you'll definitely need an inspector. But we all have, as industry professionals, have resources for you. So we're going to be able to get you the people that you need to make sure you're making educated decisions and advising you when, oh, this is broken, have the inspector looked at it. Okay, and the inspector says, okay, this is a repair. Now we have to get a contractor in here to get us a quote, but is this going to kill your deal? Are you nervous about this or not? And some people can handle doing some repairs, and some people say, you know what, this is out of my league and I'm going to move on to the next property. And that's okay. We need to have those conversations and very frank conversations. So feeling like you can trust the people you're working with, that you like them, that you could be honest with them, and that they're really rooting for you. And this is about you. I had just clients that just walked away from a deal and they were like, we thought you'd be upset. I'm like, no, like I'm here for the long haul. What you can live wherever you want. I'm here to help you figure out where that is. But at the end of the day, like you need to be happy with where you're one place you're putting all your money and where you're going to live. And that I can't decide that for you. I can help you get where you want to go. And that's my job. So if you don't want to go there, we're not going. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Donna. Now that we have talked a little bit about what your job is, what do people need to, how much money do they need to put down? What do they need to consider about credit score? What about FHA loans and rate lock and those kind of things? And you were talking about a new program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what people can be prepared for in
Sure. One of the programs, and again, I like this course because the most important thing to it for a successful transaction is being pre-approved. Now, there are different levels of pre-approval. One with Citi, we actually approve you for the mortgage before you identify a property. And why is that important? I've had more clients have successful first offers accepted in a very competitive environment, including competing against all cash sales, but it requires a little more work up front. And so what Citi does is we will go through everything with you. We will ask you for, it's a very compliance driven process, but we're going to validate and verify your income, your assets. We'll review your credit history, and we will make a lending decision based on that information. And that's what you need to have the confidence when you're ready to make an offer to negotiate some different components in the offer that may be very attractive to a seller. And that's something that Jody will get into a little more. But having this Sure Start pre-approval will give you a competitive advantage over other buyers. Maybe you putting their offers in for the same property, but it'll give you that competitive advantage because you've already been approved for the mortgage. The underwriting is complete. You do not go through the underwriting process again. And that, in a nutshell, is something that you should really consider taking advantage of when you're starting this process.
Victoria, you're muted.
Victoria,
I
Jody?
did it. I did it. I did the mute thing. You think Zoom would be over this by now? Like, if people have bad, I think that's a question a lot of people are worried about. Do they have bad credit? Can they fix it? How long does it take to fix? And how does that impact their mortgage application?
Sure, and that's a very good point. So a credit, yes, we're going to look at credit worthiness. It's again, it's a compliance different process, but however, I've had clients where we have coached them a year before they've purchased or 2 years. We set them on a path on what they need to do if there were some credit derogatories. There's there's a way to resolve those issues, but it might take a little more time. But at least you'll have a roadmap to get you to that ultimate goal. And as a team working together, we're all on the same page and we know what the next steps are. But there are solutions. There are ways to work around credit scores and things that might not be acceptable to a bank today, but can be tomorrow.
Great. So it's like, I think working with people long term is important. Are still people putting down 20%? Is that mandatory if these days, you think, from a bank perspective?
Right.
I know the challenges
So-
on the my end.
Yeah, so that's also a good point. Another program that we have, it's called our Home Run program, designed for first-time home buyers. So when you think of home run, just don't think of Aaron Judd, think of Citibank. And this program will allow as little as 3% down. And with it, the interest rate is below conventional market rates. When your income level is up to 120% of the average income for the area, or you're buying in, or the property is located in a low to moderate income tract in an upcoming neighborhood. So there are solutions, there are paid assistance that the program also offers when you meet those criteria, that criteria. One of the things that I do when we first meet is assembling all the products that would work for you based on your financial profile. And we would discuss and walk through these various programs. If you need down payment assistance, there are programs for that as well. It's just a matter of understanding your whole financial background to put you in the right program.
Jody, at this stage when people are interviewing their team members, what expectations, what things do you like to encourage people to ask their lawyer?
Yeah. Okay. So as I said before, buying a property is one of the biggest undertakings of someone's life. What I like to do, and then as I said, my last name is Materna and the name of my firm is Maternal Law. So a lot of people say I tend to have very maternal skills of hand-holding, taking care of my clients and whatnot. I think.
You're on mute.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
How much of that did you miss?
Only 10 seconds.
Okay. I think one of the main things is, first of all, to make sure that whoever you're speaking with, as Victoria had said, some people will say, oh, I'm going to have my cousin do the real estate deal, or I have a friend who's an attorney and they're going to handle it. That is not what you want, not when you're making such a big monetary and life-changing decision. You need someone that is a real estate attorney, someone that is seasoned, someone that knows what's the pitfalls of what happens in deals. The other thing is you need someone that's accessible. You don't want to go to an attorney where you're going to talk to the attorney one time and then you're never going to speak to them again. You want to build, what I like to do is build relationships with my clients. I've had clients for the past 15 years that I've started where they've bought a studio apartment, got married, upgraded to a 1-bedroom, upgraded to a bigger apartment, ended up leaving Manhattan, went to New Jersey. These are the types of relationships that I'd like to build with clients. You'll always have access to me. I give clients my cell phone number. So in case you want to text me or have a question or whatnot. The other thing that I like to do that I think sets me apart from a lot of other attorneys is I tend to do late night phone calls. For whatever reason, a lot of people during the day don't want to discuss their private business while they're at work. So I try to accommodate, and I'll do a 7:30, 8 o'clock phone call when we're going over closing costs, when we're going over contracts, when we're going over things that are really important, where you need to focus. And instead of you trying to sneak away from your boss, or if you're home, working from home, and in the middle of trying to answer emails, you have a dedicated 30 minutes amount of time, or sometimes 45 minutes, where we go over the nuts and bolts of the contract. With me, you will never sign a contract unless you understand everything completely. I do like to do a lot of time with that. The other thing that I like to do is in the beginning with clients, spell out the closing costs for everything. So from the second that you deal with me, whether or not you're buying a co-op or a condo, and those types of costs, and I won't get into them right now, but they're vastly different. Co-op would be much cheaper upfront. Condo is a lot more expensive. But from the second, before you sign a contract, and actually even before you even put in an offer, if you talk with me ahead of time, I will tell you how much your mortgage tax is going to be if you're getting a mortgage. If you're buying something that is over $1 million, there's mansion tax, and a lot of people don't know what that is. I will tell you what your title costs are, potential fees that you would pay in a condo through to the management agent, or in a co-op, your upfront costs about that. Those are the things that are really important in making these kinds of decisions. This way, when you find the property, and once you go to Donna, and once you have the pre-approval, and once you speak to me and you know your closing costs, potential fees, the pitfalls of a contract, then you can deal with Victoria. You can make your offer, hopefully get accepted, and the three of us work together to bring you across the finish line.
I loved that. That was great. I really
Thanks.
just hit the nail on the head there with so many important things that I think buyers really need to know about accountability and what to expect from a lawyer when they're searching for one, and what they're going to get from the transaction. Go past financing. Okay, so now you have your team assembled. You've interviewed people. I have a list of questions for all of us, not even my role. You want to ask some simple questions so that you have a threshold to be asking everybody the same thing, to feel like this is the right team. And I'll happily share that with all of you. So you've assembled your team, and this is it. You love Jody, Donna, and I, and you're ready to go into the housing market. Look with us as a team. And because we're experts, we've all been doing this for a very long time, and we're all women also. So you want some badass ladies to represent you. So I already went over. You want to create a buying strategy. So a lot of the times I talk about with people is timing. Is their lease coming up? Do they need to buy right away because their lease is expiring in 3 months, and they're now like frantic, like they don't want to re-sign this lease? Everything seems crazy. The rent is, their landlord's raising their rent, all these things. Or they have a year, they have 2 years, they like have a perfect place in mind. They only want this gem that's only going to exist in Park Slope on this block, and we're going to figure out how to find it for them and get them ready for it. So we're going to create a buying strategy based on your timing and your budget and your lifestyle needs and your quality of life and what your long-term family plans are. Are you going to stay here in New York? Are you a single person? Do you hope to one day have a partner, have children? What does your future look like? We're not going to buy an apartment for a child that does not exist yet. People always want to talk about school district, like the child is not even has not even been created yet. Let's not buy an apartment based on something that doesn't exist yet, because when that time comes, you will make those hard decisions about if you have to sell or rent or go to private school. But that we're going to find you what you can afford now that fits your quality of life. So we're going to create a strategy together, trying to figure out what your timeline is and how to work. Do you need me at every showing? Is this going to be a 2-year long home run stretch where I'm going to come for 1 or 2 in the beginning, help you figure things out, but then you're spending a year like just going to open houses, learning, because you need time. You're a slow learner. Some people are fast. Everybody works differently. So we're going to create a strategy that works with your needs and what you need for this transaction. There's no pushy sales pitch here. What other things? Other thing to consider for the lifestyle thing is your commute. Are you always going to be working from home? Are you going to need to live? I live in Red Hook. It is not for everybody. I have a car. I have a scooter, I drive it up to the subway. If you work from home now, does that mean that are you picking a place based on that? Or are you picking a place knowing that you could one day have to commute? So do you need a subway line? Do you need to run in the park every day? Because that is the thing that is your mental health treatment. So you need to be by Prospect Park. So these are the conversations we're going to have, and we're going to make a strategy and plan for you to start figuring out what you want, not you just going on Street Easy and being like, this one's pretty. Because, I call it real estate porn, and it is that people like to really look at the internet, and constantly real estate is beautiful. People can make really beautiful properties. And that's the other thing I warn people about. Are you buying the four walls, or are you buying the lifestyle that someone has created for you? They are telling a story and you are buying into it. They have beautiful things. Their place could be in a magazine. It's not realistic. They can live like this. Make sure that you're falling in love with the place based on what neighborhood it's in, the community and building it's in, and the actual kitchen and bathroom and walls that will stay there, not the furniture in life that someone has created for you to be attracted to. They're really good in sales and design. So finding your dream home. First, we're going to figure out, do your amenities match with the neighborhood and building typology that you want? So a lot of people are like, I want a doorman and I want to be in a pre-war building. Okay, so what neighborhoods have that? Prospect Heights, Brooklyn Heights, probably not Park Slope, right? Gowanus? No, it's mostly new construction. Williamsburg is mostly new construction. So trying to figure out, I want to be in a co-op, Sunset, Park Slope, Prospect Heights, but what amenities and building typology all align? Do you want a brand new building with a gym and all these things, but you want to be in Cobble Hill? Going to be challenging, right? Brooklyn Heights too. There's few and far between on there, and they're pretty pricey because condos, we know, as we learned from Jody, are more expensive than co-ops in both ways, purchase price and with closing costs. And there's reasons for that. And because if you can't rent, a lot of times there's a lot of rental restrictions around co-ops. There's a lot of restrictions on what you can do with the apartments. So figuring out what your deal breakers are and what you need, and do they align, and can we find a neighborhood, unless you want to just live in the neighborhood you're already in. We went over a little bit about closing costs, and I'll leave that to Jody. And where do you search? So if you have assembled your team, you are working with a buyer's broker that's going to tell you where to search and create a back-end database search for you through their MLS so that listings are coming to you. You're going to say, hey, I like these apartments, these 5 apartments. I am free on Friday, Saturday, Sunday between 2 and 4. And then they're going to make all those appointments for you. Some of them, they will come with you, some they won't, depending on where you are in the search. But that is their job, is to organize your schedule, make it convenient for you, and ask any questions that are relevant to your search criteria. If they sent you you sent them a bunch of properties, but one of them doesn't say if they take dogs, and you have a dog. So they need to also, besides trying to schedule, clarify that they take dogs there. That is their job, to make sure you're not wasting your time and energy going to see apartments that don't fit your specification. And you don't want to be going on the internet contacting all these brokers, because that broker that his name is on the listing represents the seller. Or if you're going on Street Easy, they are somebody that's an expert, and Street Easy makes money off of making sure that buyer's broker, which I do too, get represented by buyer's brokers. So you want to be contacting working with the person that represents you, that you have selected for you, and that the seller's broker, who's representing the seller, is there going to be advocating for the seller. So you shouldn't talk to them until ever, or at the open house, because you just show up and they don't have an agent. They might try to say, let me be your agent, and then call you all the time. And if you have 10 of those, that could be really annoying, because that's what they're trained to do, and it's not their fault. You've made it yourself available. It's dating. You put your photo on the dating app, and so now they will message you. Okay, next slide. Where do you search? We just talked about that. You're getting the back-end database. The other one for me is Street Easy, though. I think it's really user-friendly. Just be careful. There are a lot of buyer's agents on there that are unrepresented, or buyer's agents on there that are on the listing. So you won't necessarily be contacting the seller's agent, or you are counting the seller's agent. But just send you the listings to your buyer's broker. Next slide. Making an offer and negotiating terms. So this, I'm going to make sure that we jump in and talk about this question that came in with when you're making an offer, the process and deal transaction for cash offers. And somebody asked too, and we're going to come back to it, about the self-employed for the pre-approval, and Donna will just remind me to go back there. So if you're all cash, I'll use that as an example right now. Okay, we found your dream apartment. So I like to outline it for people. There is your A, B, and C apartment. A's apartment, absolutely love it. You have it. You've looked everywhere. This is it. Your B apartment, if you got it at the right price, you would live there. You like it enough that like you're willing to spend money on it, but that is not hitting a couple boxes for you. Maybe you've been outbid on so many apartments, you're gonna have to take your bid of B apartment. Or your C apartment was, if they did all of these things and jumped through all these hoops, you would take that apartment. It's not ideal, but if it was a really good deal, you would do it. So I like people to categorize what apartments they are bidding on. So for the cash offer, I'm gonna say, this is your dream apartment. We're gonna use that scenario. And we're gonna give you some other parameters. So this apartment, I'll use a specific apartment I worked on last week. This apartment just came on the market. It's in Sunset Park. It's a 2-bedroom co-op that is renovated to the nines. It's only showing on Sunday. There's one open house, and they're calling for best and final by Wednesday. There's a lot of people at the open house. My clients put in their offer first at $50,000 over asking. Then I have another client who also wants to see this property and put in an offer. I call the broker up, and she gives me some guidance on what other things are in contract in the building. And I call my client who already lives in the building and get some intel from them. So based on the intel that I got from them, I tell the buyers that information and help guide them to tell them what I think that the apartment will sell for. Those people have to decide how far they're willing to go up and if that number makes sense to them. There are 13 offers, I've been told. If you're all cash, what would your offer be if you knew there were 13 all offers and say you knew at least one of them was $50,000 over ask? Does that person want to chime in or take themselves off mute? No? RR. For the process for the deal transaction for all cash. Okay, so I'm gonna pretend, okay, you love it, you want to have it. You have to take this information. Most people that think they have all cash think they have leverage, and so that they can take money off. But what they do really have leverage is to beat everybody else, and they might have to pay more to do and pay what the top offer would pay. So just because you're all cash doesn't mean that you're going to be in a position where you get to pay less. If the apartment was on the market for 6 months or 3 months and you were in much more of a leveraged position, then you could maybe negotiate on the price. If you're all cash, what you're offering to the seller is no financing contingency, because a bank doesn't have to approve you or the building. So that's off the table. So that makes you very attractive. And that means you can close a lot quicker. This was a co-op, so you can't close that quick, but because you'd still have to assemble your board package and you would still have to get interviewed by the board, but you're moving a lot faster than a co-op, a finance offer, because you don't have to wait to get the commitment letter. And that's what Donna was talking about earlier, is that they have the program that you can get pre-approved for a commitment, and then just the building goes to underwriting instead of you. So it'll make the process go a lot faster. And it's close enough it's a big advantage and would put you as a contender against somebody that is an all cash buyer. So all cash, then you don't need a mortgage professional, and you don't need to have a financing contingency, and you would put in your all cash offer, but you'd still have your lawyer, and you would go into contract still with 10% down and probably close within 30 to 45 days, depending how fast the co-op board moved and if you got approved by them, because you'd still have to get approved by the co-op board if it's a co-op. There's no co-op board and it's a condo or a 1 to 4 family house, then you should be smooth sailing, and there shouldn't be any hiccups if you're all cash, as long as there's no crazy family member that comes out of the woodwork and says that they own the building. Does that answer your question on the all cash situation? So for not all cash situations, you're going to put in an offer that has a financing contingency, that's going to have a inspection contingency, usually because you want to have the property inspected to make sure it's not falling down, doesn't have any huge problems that financially you need to take into account for it. Like it needs a new boiler, or the windows are all rotted, or there's an assessment that nobody told you about. So you usually put in your cover letter, your pre-approval, and your revenue submit offer form to show that you have the finances to actually make this purchase and that you're going to pass the board process too if it's a co-op. Other things that I'm not thinking about, Jody, for getting the offer in that I'm missing if you would want to see on a deal sheet?
No, I think that both everything you explained makes sense. The only other thing, the second layer of that is once you give in the offer, what has to happen from the attorney perspective? And Victoria, I don't know if you want me to touch on this now, is just
Go for it.
quickly, is due diligence. So whether or not you're buying a co-op or a condo, I do the same exact due diligence for everybody. And this is the important part of it. What I will look at is 2 years of financials for the building to make sure that the building is financially stable. The other thing that I look at is 2 years of board minutes. Now, sometimes board minutes don't necessarily give you all the information that you need, but it may be good if we find out that there perhaps was a leak in the apartment or there was a fire in one of the apartments. Sometimes it will say that there is a rodent issue in a building. Those are good things to know going into it. The third thing that I do is I reach out to the management company and do a questionnaire, asking them if there's any litigation in the building, because if there is, that will affect Donna in getting you financing. The other thing is we'll ask if there's any kind of assessments that are coming up. As Victoria said in one of her examples, somebody may be looking for a pre-war building. If you're looking for a pre-war building, those buildings tend to be older. They tend to require some maintenance. Over time, all buildings will require maintenance. And if there isn't enough money in a reserve account in a building, and when work needs to get done, whether or not it is a roof deck, a boiler, an elevator, painting, anything in the building, if there isn't enough money, they will put an assessment on the unit owners. And generally it is the unit owner's proportionate share that is owed. I have seen assessments that have been anywhere from $1,000 to assessments that are $50,000 on people. And the one that was $50,000, my client loved the apartment. It was in Manhattan. They knew about it up front. They thought that it was a one-of-a-kind place. They were still going forward with it, but it's my responsibility to make sure that you know this information before you sign the contracts and go ahead with everything.
Yeah, and to dovetail off of that, Jody, one of the things that we also do at City, we have the largest database of approved co-ops and condos in the country. And because we're a New York lender, and there might be something a little awry in one area, but we really believe that the building is secure and safe, we'll go ahead and we'll still lend in that building because it may just be a little off, and we consider that a non-warrantable building. But we still have that capability to make a loan if we like the client, we like the financials of the client, and we know the building.
The other question I think that people run into there with the financing bit is the, like, if there's too many renters in the condo, right? You same problem, right? It becomes unwarrantable.
And at City, we're pretty flexible with that. Two things, we'll go up to 49% renters. And if we really like the financials of the building, like at 30 Lincoln Plaza, where 2/3 are renters and a third are owners, because we like the financials, we're familiar with it, we'll lend in the building as a non-warrantable.
The other thing I was gonna say is, oh, I lost my train of thought about making the offer and doing the due diligence. Oh, one question, Jody, I have that I think I've run in with some of my deals, and every lawyer is different. Do you ask the client if they want me to be included on conversations or not? Because some lawyers.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And generally, it depends on the client. I let them know and ask them. But what I like to do is put the brokers on all email exchanges. This way, everybody knows what's happening at the same time. It just makes it so much easier. Instead of one person says one thing, the other person says the other thing. This way, it's one email. And even if you're having a busy day at night, you go through your emails and you can catch up on a deal and know exactly what's happening. And it's just great to have everybody on the same page.
I agree. I've definitely has not worked in the client's interest for me to not be on threads at some points, and I've missed comments from, I didn't get the questionnaire and other things, that if we had compared it to the inspection report, things would have shaken out a little bit differently. So I'm glad to hear that I think that's an important part of, and you guys should ask that of your lawyers and your mortgage professionals to keep everybody on the same page, because they're going to be able to answer questions and guide you through this, and you don't know what you're missing. And people can, like, you can say, oh, what did Donna mean when she said that in this thing? Or if you don't want to feel comfortable asking Donna for some reason, I can help explain everything so that you're getting multiple perspectives and multiple people's.
Yeah, and one of the other things too, when we set up a loan, when the property is identified, we'll also reach out to the attorney, we'll reach out to Victoria, just to make sure that we have what we need for the building. If we have to update documents, sometimes we'll even use to save the client money from paying for a questionnaire. From time to time, we've been able to use attorneys' questionnaires. So and I agree, Jody, we do the same thing. Everybody's included on all emails. So everybody's on the same page, including the bank attorney.
And the other thing that I just wanted to point out that I don't know if people on this group necessarily know is that even if you give an offer and your offer is accepted, and even if a contract gets sent out, you don't have a full agreement until the contract is signed by you as a purchaser, your 10% contract deposit is accepted by the seller's attorney, and the seller countersigns. Up until the point that the seller countersigns, they can go and they can, if there's an all cash buyer that comes in $100,000 over, they can go sell the apartment to somebody else. So the main point to bring home again is to make sure that you have your team in order so that you know that you have your pre-approval, you have your attorney in order that is going to be able to do your due diligence fast, that they know exactly what they're looking for in whether or not there's going to be any assessments. They'll know the pitfalls once again in a contract and what to guide you on and what's important and what's not important. And it just makes the process go as fast but as smooth as possible for you, because the goal is, and everybody's goal is, to get you into your home, whether or not it is your first home or like the apartment of your dreams. Regardless, it is supposed to be smooth, it is supposed to be happy, it is supposed to be delightful, which is why at closing, everybody in my closings takes pictures together. But there's a lot that happens to get to the point of closing.
And even though at the beginning, when you're putting in offers and we're negotiating, it feels like they are the other side, right? Because everybody's trying to get the most out of the situation. But after that, we've all agreed, we're all on the same team because they want to close and you want to close and you want to move in and they want to move out. We're all on the same team. So everybody's working together to get to the end result, unless there's hopefully no problems going, because then it's trying to work out any of that hiccups that could come up. But most of the job is like we're all on the same team trying to get to the closing table as smoothly and as quickly as possible and make it as stress-free as possible for you guys. And that's why it's great. You know, I work with the same brokers and same lawyers over and over again. It's really in your advantage, like I said, working with seasoned professionals, because it's great when I introduce Jody to another lawyer on a deal sheet and they're like, oh, hi, Jody, it's Rashida. Oh, great, got to do another deal together. And when I put in an offer for you and I get to put into a broker I've done other transactions with, they already know me. They already know what it's like for me to work with them and to get their client through how I've coached a client through a deal. And so they're more likely to pick seasoned agents that they already have relationships with. And so that's why you want to pick seasoned industry experts when you're going through this process, because relationships really are important. That's why I'm not worried about AI in my job, because at the end of the day, it really means a lot for me to say, oh, you know what, this broker, I've done 5 deals with them. They're so great. They're always really great with their clients. This deal's going to get done. And I can say that to my client, even if their client's offering $5,000 less than the other one. Let's go with the assured situation where we know that this person's not a gamble, because I've never worked with that other broker and they're from a company I don't know, and they're using a mortgage company I've never heard before, and all these other things. You want to go with people that have a track record in the industry. And that's what I think that, especially everybody on this call does. So we have done the due diligence and we've done the inspection. So while they're doing the due diligence and looking at the building, everything, we're doing an inspection and making sure that everything works. There's not any huge red flags. There is an opportunity to negotiate if things do come up, and that we're finding things about that. And you have an opportunity to walk away. If you find some red flag and, oh my God, the building is crumbling around you and this is not what you thought you were signing up for, you're walking away. There's tons of off-ramps until you sign the contract. So we do the due diligence so we understand what we're getting into. So you exit now before you put the deposit down. And this is not like other states. In California, there are no lawyers. The real estate agent writes the contract. So New York City is a very specific beast. So no, that's why we do this class. So you don't look on the internet and try to figure out how this works, because we have the first-hand knowledge to say, this is how it is specifically here. So you are getting the inspection done. Everything's coming up great. You're ready to move forward. You're going to put your deposit down and sign the contract. Jody will explain to you what happens. That deposit is not refundable unless some never experience things happen. Want to tell us about what happens when you're committing and signing the contract?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're ready, after due diligence is done, your inspection is done, after we have reviewed the contract, then the next step is to put down your 10% contract deposit. That 10% can either be wired to the seller's attorney or sent via check. What happens then? The money goes into the seller's attorney's account. The attorney cannot touch it. They can't use it for themselves. They cannot disclose it or give it to the seller before closing. It is strictly held as a placeholder, as like a good faith deposit, showing that your intention to purchase the property. Yeah.
Okay. And then you're in contract. And what
Oh,
happens?
yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So then we go into contract. After we're in contract, the next step is I then would order a title report. For if it is a condo, we order a title report, and the title report is going to tell us whether or not there are any liens, judgments, violations, open mortgages. Recently, there was something that came up in a deal that I had, something as minor as my client, who's a seller, 10 years ago, had plumbing work done in their apartment. The plumber opened up a permit, never closed it. Now they have to have that permit closed because the new buyer is buying with clean title. Things like that come up. You can also have a seller that has not only mortgage has to get paid off. I've had people where they owe taxes to the IRS. That needs to get paid off. Things as small as parking tickets come up and people have to pay those. If you're buying into a house, you could have a sidewalk judgment or a judgment for trees or whatnot. There's a vast amount of things that people don't even think about that come up in title reports. And I work with the seller's attorney in order to make sure that those items are cleared so that when you purchase, the only lien that's going to be on the property is going to be your mortgage. The same thing stands if you're buying a co-op. With a co-op, we would order a lien search, which is substantially cheaper than which is a couple $100 versus a couple $1,000 for a condo. But it's the same kind of concept where we would check to see if there's any open mortgages on the property. And that is called a UCC. What we'll do at closing, make sure that is paid off. There will actually be a different attorney that comes to the closing, the payoff attorney. They will pay off the loan, and then a UCC3 gets filed showing that there is no further mortgages except for your new mortgage. As a side note, post-closing, whether or not it's condo or co-op, I prepare a closing binder for my clients, which ranges anywhere from 150 to 200 pages. Sounds like a lot, but it's going to have every single piece of information in there that you will ever need. Your contract, your inspection report, your appraisal report, copies of your title information, deeds, stock certificates, and any type of information from management, and then a complete list of summary of fees and expenses. And then that gets sent as a Google Drive, so everybody has it, and you can access it for as long as Google stays in business.
A long time. So Donna,
and also while you're going through that process, that's when the bank will start to dig into all aspects of your life once you're in contract. And because it's a compliance-driven process, we're going to look for the ability to repay the mortgage. We're going to look for sufficient post-close liquidity. These are all things we cover in the pre-approval, but once you're in contract, again, it's all finalized with the underwriter.
Great. So while you're in underwriting, and so then if it's a co-op, I'm waiting for the bank to get me the commitment. Once they give me the commitment, then I can submit your board package to the co-op board. And the co-op board will then hopefully move very quickly and look through it and schedule your interview. But in most chances, some of them like, we have 6 weeks, don't rush us. So we need to just take into account, and we'll ask the other broker what to expect and the management company on the timeline, because that's important because of your rate and other things that we want to take into consideration. And I'll prep you for the board interview. I've only had one person not make it through in my 19 years. So I think that I have a really good track record, knocking on wood there. And then once the co-op board approves you, or the bank approves your loan, then we are going to the closing table. First, we'll do the final walkthrough, which means that we're getting the apartment in the condition we expect it to be, with no leaks and all the appliances working, and they shouldn't have turned off the utilities, so that we can check the gas and check the electric and make sure you're getting the apartment like I said. And that should happen within 48 hours of the closing. And then you're showing up to the closing table, and the morning of, not any earlier, you will get the amounts of the checks that you need to bring to the closing table. And then Donna and Jody will tell you what is happening, because I just show up and give you a bottle of champagne.
Yeah, and about 3 days, anywhere from a week to 3 days before closing, we're required to give you an initial closing disclosure, which gives you a template or an idea of what you can expect to bring to the closing that day. So you'll have ample time to review it, also review it with your attorney before you actually start cutting the checks.
And Jody, what's happening at the closing table for you?
Yeah, so once everybody gets a closing disclosure from Donna, what I do is I take the information from there and I have to manipulate the figures so that because there's additional fees that you will have to pay. So Donna's part of it is just the amount of your loan. The other thing is the amount of your title fees, the amount that is owed to the building. Sometimes you have a move-in fee, sometimes there's a move-in deposit. There's various small little fees. I put that together on a financial statement for you, and we'll go over it generally about 48 hours before closing. I'll explain to you what checks need to be made certified checks. I'll also explain to you that you need to come to closing. Closings take about an hour to an hour and a half. You should bring 2 forms of ID. IDs could be a passport or a driver's license. You have to make sure that they're not expired, because if they are, then we cannot use them to verify who you are. The reason why the IDs are necessary is not only to show that you are who you say you are, but all of your documents have to be notarized by a notary public. And the notary public will stamp all the documents, and your IDs are what shows. At the closing, we'll sit down. I will go over all of the loan documents with you, explain them, show you where to sign. We will go over the condo documents, the title fees, and everything else that goes with it.
So sounds good. So it sounds like we're gonna get to the closing table, and that's where you will get your keys and your wrist will hurt because you'll be signing so many pieces of paper. And then you own a home. My other advice for you at this point is to not schedule your movers for the day of your closing. It always makes it very stressful for people, and you'll just have to pay that extra rent. I know it feels like a stretch, but this is the last of it. And don't be a penny pincher now. I know it's hard, but you're just going to be eating ramen for the next year or so. And that's just the norm. We call it house rich, cash poor. And you'll be thankful in a couple of years that you have done it. So I think there was one question we didn't get to that I saw, which was about being self-employed for Donna. Is there any considerations somebody that works for themselves needs to take?
Again, with my underwriting background, I can really scrub through tax returns. Listen, I've had stacks of returns on self-employed, very complicated. But that's one of the things I do up front with a self-employed person. I get all of the information with the tax returns, the profit and loss, and the balance sheet. And I basically underwrite them before we even send any information to underwriting, just to make sure that there are no surprises. And if there are things, if I believe that you'd be better served with maybe a no qualifying type mortgage, would be a higher interest rate. We don't do those types of loans, but I have resources. So I would make those recommendations, because my goal is to make sure that you have a successful transaction, whether it be with me or someone else when you're self-employed.
I appreciate that. It's really nice to hear, because I know other mortgage brokers do that. And it's always, if I can't help you, I'll find somebody that can. So I think that's a good way to handle it. Is there any other questions before we wrap up?
Although I do have to say one thing. Last year I had 5 declines. Of the 5, I had 4 reversed from underwriting and credit risk.
That's pretty
And
impressive.
again, it's because of my background.
I'm impressed. So just before we close things out, guys, I'm just looking in the chat here. Is there any questions before we wrap things up? I just want to go over that you'll get a recording of this, and you can reach out to us at any time where there's going to be links to scheduled times to talk to us along with our contact information. We have a home buying handbook, a whole ebook that I wrote to help guide people through this process. And when we work with people, we set them up in a project management tool I built out through Basecamp. So it's a library of resources. So at each step of the way, you have information at your fingertips so that you're not staying up at night freaking out about what can I ask for in the inspection? And I've laid it out all out there for you. It's there at your fingertips. So will be available to you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming to the class. I hope you learned a lot and really appreciate everybody's time here today. Good night. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Oh, got some thanks in the chat here. Great. Thank you. Good night.